welcome to episode 14 of Remembering Woodstock. And welcome once again, my good friend and partner in crime, Vince Lupo. Now today, Vince, we're going to be talking about Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which I know is, you were sharing with me in one of the past episodes that you're quite a fan of this band. So let's get right into it. Tell the story of how you first became a fan of the band.
Well, when they first came out, it goes back before they came out.
Okay.
Before they came out, Al Cooper, Mike Bloomfield had the Blues Project.
Okay.
So I became a fan of that. I think that was '66.
Interesting.
And they were great. Just a great. I was more newer into the blues, and they helped to get my interest going. And then you realize, oh wow, all of what I'm into is all from the blues.
Yeah.
And rhythm and blues and all of that going back. So when it came out that they were putting together this Blood, Sweat, and Tears group, and he was in it, I was like, okay, it's got to be good. And then the album came out, and it was very interesting to hear the marriage of rock, blues, jazz, with the horns, and the more complex arrangements and things like that. It was still a blues based, and he was still the lead singer. So that was really cool. And then when he was out of the band, I didn't know why.
We
didn't get that news back then. That they went to David Clayton Thomas, and then after reading up, I know more of the history, but I knew a lot afterwards, being a musician. So when they did David Clayton Thomas, it was such a difference of vocal style. It was like, whoa.
It's funny you say that, because I want to let people know, listening to this, there's quite an age gap between you and me, Vince, and what's interesting in doing the research and my homework on this today, this is probably the one band of all the bands we talked about so far that I knew the least about. Probably prior to doing this today, probably the only Blood, Sweat, and Tears song I really was familiar with was Spinning Wheel. And we're also, going to be talking about the fact that 2021 marks the 50th anniversary of their Blood, Sweat, and Tears 4 album, which is quite an accomplishment. But I kind of listened to that first, interestingly enough, and I kind of thought, this sounds like an album kind of full of show tunes. But then when I went and I started researching the songs they played at Woodstock, and I listened to some of those tunes, I thought, you know what, this music really is kind of starting to get to me much more than the stuff on the later album.
Right. And from researching some of their background, they brought up the fact that they were influenced to put the band together because of the popularity of the Buckinghams, who used so much brass on their songs.
Yeah.
So this was an outgrowth of that, but it had much more. It was a little less poppy. Let's call it a little less pop, and more punch, more jazz, more of a fusion, which came even a little further on down the road. Although album 2 and album 3, which are night and day different than the first one, Child is Father to the Man, was way more in pop and in covers, those two albums. And so those first three albums became their standard. And then after that, as we had discussed on our chats, the fourth album, while it still was gold, it did not keep them catapulted. I think that the public, just kind of got tired of them. Yeah,
what's interesting, and again, I'm talking from perspective of a guy that only knew the one song, Spinning Wheel. And so today I'm listening to some of the stuff, I'm kind of listening with fresh ears, somebody that's kind of hearing it for the first time. And I was interested to read that the Blood, Sweat, and Tears number 4 album was kind of at the band's kind of end of their commercial success, and it said it reached as high as number 10 on the pop Billboard chart. Now it's kind of interesting because I listened with my ears to that album from start to finish. It did not sound much like a pop album to me, because I guess of what I kind of think of a pop album from my years of being on planet Earth. But listening to the stuff again that they played at Woodstock, that sound much more kind of I guess, radio friendly, much more of something that I could kind of go see a band live and kind of rock out to,
Right. Well, I listened to the fourth.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fourth the songs on the fourth one don't have the hooks.
That's exactly what it was missing. It to me, it almost sounded like an album of show tunes. And there's one song in there that kind of remind me of kind of something Frank Sinatra might do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the public by that time, they were not out of the loop, but they were really not a top 40 staple. Now, for the sake of the audience,
yeah.
Back in the day, the 50s, 60s, and the 70s, we had more of AM music on the AM dial, which now is mostly talk, sports, or news, and those sorts of things, and not that much music. So that morphed into album-oriented rock into the later 60s and through the 70s, where that's where your music was found, because the fidelity was 1,000 times better than listening to AM radio. Where you lost all definition. You could basically just hear the songs.
And it really shows you in listening, kind of when they're at the peak of their career, in Woodstock in '69, to that final album came out in '90, or the number 4 album came out in 1971. You kind of hear the progression of the band, or degression, if you will, and it really shows you how changing just one or two members of the band really can affect the sound of the band.
Well, it's interesting you should bring up the changing of the members, because as we both know and have done the history, they changed members like guys change their socks.
Yeah.
Incredible. There was one member in that band on the first few albums, at the very least, Jim Fielder. You know who Jim Fielder came from?
No.
From the Mothers of Invention.
Oh, wow.
He was one of the originals of the Mothers of Invention, playing bass. And then he went into this more of a pop vein, obviously.
Yeah.
So to me, the first album is separate.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely separate. That was the one where they put their thoughts and their emotions in it. It's grittier. You could almost tell it's grittier.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even listening to these songs today, Vince, I could almost picture myself, if I had been in that Woodstock audience like you and had seen the band performing that day, I could almost kind of see myself listening to the stuff they performed that day, getting up on my feet and really kind of, interacting, between the band and the crowd.
For sure.
And the songs on the album number 4, which I think it's kind of interesting that we're kind of bookending the conversation, between the Woodstock set and, that album, because it's kind of when the band's at the beginning, at the peak of their career, where they're kind of coming to an end, and how drastically different the band's sound was at that point.
Right. Well, album 2 and album 3 was the peak of their recording career, I would say.
Okay.
Album 1 was the breakthrough album, and then what they tried to... Cooper didn't want to let go of the lead vocals.
Wow.
Now, the guy who's still the drummer and is, I think, the band owner at this point is Bobby Colomby. He's the original guy, and I love his playing. Guy is fantastic still.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But it changed so much from 1 to 2, which had much more... If you listen to those tunes, and on 3, they're polished, they're more produced, they're overall cleaner sounding. It had more of a pop bent than even the first album, which was very blues-based first. That was really where they started, with a blues, rock, jazz, where the second and third became more jazz, rock, with a little bit of blues.
Yeah.
And that's where this David Clayton Thomas voice came in. And then on the fourth album that we're discussing, they have 2 big songs on that album, if I'm not mistaken. Heidi Ho.
Okay.
Which was written by Carole King.
Oh, wow.
Going back. So that became a hit. I do remember that song being a hit. And then the big one was Lucretia McEvil.
Oh, wow.
So those 2 songs were pretty big hits.
Yeah.
Lucretia was way bigger than the other one. And when they say that the album was gold, that's $1 million of sales.
Yeah, that's something, but yeah. Yeah.
Right, but it's not a million units. A million units is platinum.
Yeah, yeah. And again,
Right.
yeah, and again, it's kind of interesting because anytime you hear anybody bring up the name Blood, Sweat, and Tears, pretty much that first album is what they point to. Is because you can, I think, anybody listening to that music, you can kind of say, that's when the band was kind of really young and hungry. They were really at their peak. Many times you'll hear people say, a band has, their whole life to make their debut album. In the sense that a lot of those songs, when a band goes in for the very first time to record their first album, these are songs that are based on life experiences, things these guys have actually, lived through, and you can hear that all through that album.
Yeah. It's funny that you should say Spinning Wheel.
Yeah.
Is what you remember. Well, when it was a big hit and it just was endless,
yeah.
we were all like, "Oh, Spinning Wheel."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, again, I'm saying
from that was "You Make Me So Very Happy."
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a huge hit too. I think that had more emotion in it than Spinning Wheel, which was certainly all pop.
Oh yeah, and see, my perspective again, I think what makes this conversation so interesting is I'm quite a bit younger than you in the sense that, like, okay, I'm talking to you from my perspective, and you're a guy that actually attended, the Woodstock event. I was not even in 1969. I was not even alive yet until 1971. I came into the world. So, so they played this Woodstock event, and then 1971 when the fourth album came out, I'm just entering the world. So, like, talking about my memories of hearing that song Spinning Wheel on the radio countless times, throughout my childhood and my life. That's the one song that, okay, of all these songs we're talking, that's the one song that I can tell you countless times I've heard on the radio. So in doing the research today, I'm like, okay, that's who Blood, Sweat, and Tears are. Okay, yeah, I remember that song, but I don't remember all these other songs,
Right, the broadness of, they have a broad catalog of songs, and they have more than 4 albums.
Of course, yeah.
Let me tell you a little bit of the history about me with that band. I did not see them at Woodstock. I saw them twice prior to Woodstock. The year prior, I saw them at the same venue twice. Long Island, where I'm from, called the Westbury Music Fair, which was about a 1,500-seat, I remember, theater in the round.
Oh, wow.
The stage revolved. So that was the whole calling card of the theater in the round. So if you were a Sinatra or a performer like that, you would be able to walk around in the round and everybody would get a nice view of you. When a band set up, they set up in a circle and they would rotate the stage every couple of songs about a quarter turn so that you eventually got to see the backs of everybody and the fronts of everybody. It was not a big place at only 1,500 seats, intimate and fantastic sound. Yeah. So the first time with Al Cooper, that was great. The second time, they were stars.
Oh, interesting. And I got to tell you, Vince, right here, you're educating people like myself and, from my age group, because a lot of people, from my generation, they think, In the Round started with Def Leppard in 1987 on their Hysteria tour. That was their little selling point for that tour that a lot of people went to check out. So that's interesting to hear. All, Theater in the Round dates back to, Woodstock era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That theater was open years before.
Yeah.
With that rotating stage. I had seen the Temptations twice there with the originals.
Oh, wow.
And then the following year. Yeah, so I got to see the lead singer guy who passed away from all the drugs early on. I forget his name.
David Ruffin, wasn't it?
David Ruffin.
Yeah.
Ruffin. Oh, my goodness. To see them in the round. And then at the same time as I saw the second version of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, that same year, a group of my friends and I went and saw Chicago.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so there's a comparison
between
the two groups, of course, because they had the same 3 pieces of the horns, but a completely different feel with Terry Kath on the guitar, his vocal.
Yeah.
He was a really big difference, and the drummer in that band.
Yeah.
These guys were similar, but completely different. They had so much punch, so much drive, and so much appeal that you could tell how much they lasted.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting because like you mentioned Chicago, and that's the band I think of. When you kind of think of kind of a rock band with horns, horn section, and that. And I think that's only because Chicago was a lot more had a lot more commercial success. When you think of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, they had commercial success, but a lot of people these days think, oh, that was a band back in the '60s,
Right, that just waned with them, whereas Chicago have obviously sustained. Peter Cetera splitting off from that group, making his own solo career in the '80s and all of that, and they just kept going and going.
Yeah.
And now what they do, as we know, we'll get back on track.
Yeah.
What they do now is go out with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and then they will trade who's the headliner.
Oh, interesting.
And then they all come out at the end of the show and do the two bands together, which must be mind-blowing. I've never seen that show.
Yeah, see, I knew you were a perfect guy to talk about Blood and Sweat and Tears with for so many reasons, Vince, because, again, I'm the one, this one band that I'm familiarizing myself with today and doing my homework, but probably that I knew the least of all the bands that we've done so far.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is to be expected with someone who's as much younger as you're 20 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Let's face it, you are.
Yeah.
Almost exact, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, yeah, and that's what I love about having these conversations with you, because there's kind of that age difference and that perspective, and as much as you may be a lot more familiar with some of this stuff than I am, I have a respect for what came before me, and I think it makes for a fun conversation.
Well, thank you. We really do appreciate that very, very much.
Yeah.
These guys, to me, this band, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the first record is my thing.
Yeah.
Not the 2 and 3. Yes, we were into them, but not like, to me, with the first record that had that grittier sound. It had Al Cooper, who I enjoyed the heck out of. The songs are a little darker in nature. There's some pop on it, but there's some drive on it. It was really, really unique. When you take a band and you go through the ages and you morph along, well, it's one thing. You lose a member, you gain a member. These guys flipped almost the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard to... Oh, yeah, it's our sound. Well, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah, with that being said, are you surprised that, being that everybody kind of points to that first album as, their favorite, that they never reunited with Al Cooper? I mean, especially when you think, okay, there'd be a real, cash call if they were to do that.
Well, I don't think that was ever in the cards.
Yeah.
Because he was so upset. From what I've read, and now I've learned from in the past anyway, he was upset that he left.
Yeah.
He was out. Maybe he wanted to be the star.
Yeah.
But he had a lot more to lend to that band, and by pulling him out, the band, by its nature, became more of a pop band.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Interesting.
And his voice wasn't necessarily a pop voice. His sensibilities weren't in the pop realm. They were down and dirty blues, really. And he's a brilliant keyboard player.
Yeah, and again, it's very interesting in listening to all these songs today and prepping for this. I was really able to really kind of get much more down to the stuff they played at Woodstock. I could kind of envision myself watching a band and kind of really, standing up on my feet like you do at a concert and kind of rocking out. And, I mean, let's get into some of the songs as far as what they played at Woodstock.
Well, before we do that, I want to make a correction.
Yeah.
What I was saying about Lucretia McEvil and Heidi Ho, that was on the second record.
Oh, okay.
Third record.
Yeah.
So the fourth record with Go Down Gamblin' and Cowboys and Indians.
Oh, that's the one, yeah.
That was what the track listings were, those 1 and 2. Those was an album that I might have heard once in my life.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then picked up on a few of these as we were prepping for today.
Yeah.
And the one thing I noticed by going through the tunes was that there's nothing that grabbed me. Exactly.
That's and again, this is interesting, coming from two guys from two different generations. But I listened to that whole Blood, Sweat, and Tears number 4 album, and I maybe liked one or two songs, but nothing really grabbed me, and that's kind of the point I'm making. I kind of relate much more better to the set list they had at Woodstock.
Yes, the set list at Woodstock is phenomenal. I want to point up a couple of those. So more and more, Just One Smile is an old blues song that they did on the first record, which is outstanding. It's kind of long.
Yeah.
I think about 8 minutes. The second half of that show was more of the second album.
Interesting. Oh.
I don't know if you've noticed that. The first half was kind of the part of the first record, and the second half was kind of the second record, because they did God Bless the Child. Their version is outstanding.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they go into that that swing section.
Yeah.
Drop back. And When I Die, we all know that one. It sounds like out of the Marlboro Man commercial.
Yeah.
Like it's a Western.
Yeah.
But You Made Me So Very Happy. Smiling Phases, you know where that comes from?
Where does that come from?
That's a Traffic song.
Really? Oh, wow. Steve Winwood.
From their that first record, I believe, was Traffic. They also covered on the third album. Let me see if I can find the third album. Has some really interesting. Do you have your computer in front of you?
No.
Look up the third album.
Okay, let me see what we can find here. Let's Sweat and Tears 4. Okay, I'm going to see what I can find here. Let me go right now. Okay, I'm going to go and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Let's see here. Okay, Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3. Okay, wait.
So here, I found it.
Okay.
So, on this record, there's some really interesting song choices. Wait, that's 4. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, I got it right here. It's Heidi Ho.
3. There it is.
Yeah.
3.
Lucretia
Let's
McEvil.
go to the track. Yeah, there's a reason I wanted to bring this up. On this record, there are 4 covers. 5 covers.
Oh, wow.
So Heidi Ho's cover. Lucretia McEvil was a David Clayton Thomas original.
Okay.
The 5th cut, Fire and Rain, James Taylor. They do it in a jazzy, bluesy, almost a traditional kind of a way. So there's a cover.
Yeah.
This is why this album sold a gazillion records.
Oh, and then
covers people knew.
And I see Fire and Rain. That's a James Taylor song, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Now on side 2, cut 1, 7 minutes 49 seconds of their version of "Sympathy for the Devil."
Oh, wow. Okay.
You want to talk about bizarre?
Yeah.
You listen to that, it's bizarre, but you know it, and you bought it because the whole album for a hit or two. But then you see, you go, oh, wow, they did this. Then later on, the last song, another Steve Winwood, Jim Capaldi Traffic song, Headman, from their second album, titled Traffic. So this is what helped to sell records. They got away from the covers later on.
Yeah.
The good covers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, as a fan that listens to stuff, and a musician yourself, Vince, what do you think of when recording artists like Blood, Sweat, and Tears start like having that many covers on an album? Do you think it's more of it the record company's telling them this will help you guys sell a record, or do you think it's more of not having enough original material?
It's 50-50.
Yeah.
It really is, because the producers, they're not in total control of what goes on a record unless you get to be the Beatles.
Yeah.
And then you're in total control, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the producers of most of these records, of even these good acts, go, now, that one can't go on the record. That's just not good enough.
Yeah.
And they fight for it, and they put it on, and then it bombs. Well, whose choice was that to bomb? It was your choice to bomb, artists, not the producers. It's just the producers and engineers. Those guys they're not infallible.
Yeah.
They make poor choices too. So, what to me, what happens is when there's a band that's got 50-50 covers to originals, well, they must enjoy doing the covers.
Yeah, yeah.
And they must have done something to the covers to make them feel original.
Yeah.
You know? And to anybody who's astute to what's been out there, you know, let's say you've never heard a Traffic record in your life.
Yeah, yeah.
And you hear this, you go, wow. That's mind-blowing. I can't imagine anybody saying, I've never heard Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones.
No.
I can't imagine that, you know? So people might be a little harsher that way. Fire and Rain, mega hit. How could you not know it? They didn't bastardize it so much that it was unrecognizable. So people go, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of that. I think I shared this story with you once before when we did our Janis Joplin episode. I'd originally heard Gilby Clarke, who used to be a guitar player in Guns N' Roses. On one of his solo albums, he did a great cover of Janis Joplin's song, Mercedes-Benz. Now, here's an interesting thing. I heard Gilby's version of a song before I ever heard the Janis version. And he really did a great job of kind of owning the song. He stayed kind of true to the original, but he really kind of rocked it up a little bit more. And when I heard the Janis version, it sounded really kind of different, but again, I kind of dig both versions, but kind of maybe because I heard the Gilby Clarke version first, I kind of lean towards that one a little more. That's just my opinion.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Let me give you another example along the same line. And people in the audience are going to probably think, oh, yeah, I see what Vince is talking about. The song, You Really Got Me.
Oh, yeah.
Now, who did it originally?
The Kinks, but a lot of people listening to this are gonna say, "Oh no, wait a minute, that's a Van Halen tune." But
exactly.
Again, your point of Van Halen did such a great job of really owning that song that people from the '70s, they think, "Oh no, they did the song." Very much, I think. But what'll really kind of take this point home we're trying to make is, I'm sure, Vince, you've heard the Beatles song "Helter Skelter." Again, a lot of those same people think that's a Motley Crue song, but yet no, that's a Beatles song, and I dare say that's probably the most metal song in the Beatles catalog.
There's no question that, and She Ain't Heavy.
yeah.
So you got to figure there's a generational gap.
Of course.
So people who are 14 years younger than me, who heard Van Halen, became a big Van Halen, and then heard this, which I think was on their second record, I can't remember. But they hear this and go, wow, that's great, never knowing.
Yeah, and see, the thing with the Kinks, to me, if you listen to the Kinks version, not only is it the original version, but if you listen to the Kinks, their version is a little more kind of raw, whereas Van Halen kind of polished it up a little bit.
Right. Oh, very raw.
Yeah.
These guys here, these Blood, Sweat, and Tears guys, they carved their place in history. They brought up the horn band.
Yeah.
Of course, with them in Chicago. Let me tell you a personal story. Back in that day, in 1969, 1970, 71, early part of 72, I was part of a house band in a place that was right near my college. I was new in college in fall '69. The place was called Wales College Lounge.
Oh wow!
So and there was a band that came up in the region that was a horn band.
Wow.
They were really good. But then we were the other local hot shots. 2 guitars, bass, and drums.
Wow.
Basically, the Beatles.
Yeah.
And all 4 of us sang it, blah, blah, blah. So there was no comparison between the 2 bands. They found their own... we found our own audiences, and you could tell they were playing Ides of March, da-da-da-da-da.
Wow.
And, that song. And all of that stuff. So all of those bands with the horns came up, but only 2 really survived.
Yeah, and see, that's why if you listen to a band like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, or even Chicago, as you mentioned, a lot of people on the surface, when you initially hear, a rock band with horns in it, you think kind of like, I don't know, that's really going to work. But then you hear this stuff, and you're like, yeah, that's why this band maybe kind of stood out back in the 60s, because they were so different.
It was innovative.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's probably the best term. Every time there was a needle skip on a record, let's say it, the Beatles came from Elvis in the 50s. That's what happened, right? Later on, you had the heavier guys that came from Jeff Beck and all of those guys. So there's like a skip on a record, and then the horn bands coming out, and all this while Motown was still going. We had so much variety back then. Yeah, everything was innovative and new. Everything.
Yeah,
it was just like mind blowing. Everything. It was a new. Wow, there's something new. A new sound, a new feel, to grab a new portion of the pie, of the audience, the listening audience.
Yeah, I mean, like
time to be alive.
I mean, like you go to I urge people to go to www.woodstock.com. That's kind of the official Woodstock page that we get a lot of our information from, and you just go looking at who played, the list of artists that played that day, and you look at how vastly different they are. I mean, everybody from, we've talked about, Janis Joplin, Blood, Sweat and Tears, The Who, Jimi Hendrix, I mean, Creedence Clearwater Revival, 10 Years After. I mean, just the diversity of artists and how drastically different, Santana, they all sound.
Yes, and you can take that through the decades.
Yeah.
Through the 70s, through the 80s. Now you've got bands like MTV influenced, Talking Heads, and the like. Going up into the 90s with the grunge, the progression of music, the innovation, that it still keeps happening today. They're still innovating today. So you can't say, I'm just a fan of one. Well, you can. Of one era or another. Where I'm more of a fan of music. If it's happening, I want to know it's happening.
Yeah, see, that's what's interesting, having these conversations with you, Vince. Like I said, we're like two generations apart, and yet we can kind of appreciate this music, even though I wasn't there and you were. I remember, like, even growing up in the 70s and 80s, and you'd hear stuff on the radio, MTV, and be talking about, like, those are bands from back in the 60s. That's dinosaur rock. We're of a new, improved rock of the 70s and 80s or whatever. And there's this need for people to kind of categorize things and kind of put things in little boxes. But I'm more like you, to me. Music is music. I mean, there's different types, like everything, but to me, I don't have to categorize. I mean, I'm a guy that typically listens to hard rock or metal, but like, I even find myself listening to other stuff like Tom Petty and the Eagles. You know why? Because it's good music, and it's great songwriting in it, and that's the stuff, if we're honest, that really kind of stands the test of time.
It's a piece of history.
Yeah.
I am still have my mind blown.
Yeah.
I've got two stepkids who I've been ever since they've been little itty bitty kids.
Yeah.
My stepdaughter, who's 31, and my stepson will be 29 soon.
Yeah.
My stepson was more into, at 12 years old, Eric Clapton and the blues.
Interesting.
He started playing guitar then. He's a bass player now. But he was into all this old music because of Dad. Now
let me ask you this, in regards to him being into Eric Clapton, like, did he start off like just a fan of his solo music? Did it start out with Cream, or did he go back and learn about earlier stuff?
First thing he ever learned on guitar at 12 was the song Layla.
Interesting.
Beginning to end.
Yeah.
It blew my mind to hear me come home from a regular day job, to hear some guy playing guitar in the computer room, playing along to the computer note for note. Anyway, besides him being advanced, the point is not really him. It's my daughter, who knows all the old stuff from when I was a kid. I've played several gigs with a local band who does a lot of Stones and Petty and a lot of other things. There's a wide variety, and there she is in the audience, singing along to all of these songs from the 60s and 70s and some from the 80s. How do you know all of this stuff?
Well, I'll tell you how, as a guy that's quite a bit younger than you, Vince, see, that's why I have an appreciation for a lot of this music, not that necessarily I grew up on it. I grew up on it in a way because a lot of this stuff, even as a kid, even though I might been more into a band like Kiss or Queen, than maybe the Beach Boys, stuff like that. You'd still get in the car with mom and dad, and you'd hear stuff from like the generation before all over radio, because by then that's considered like classic rock or whatever. I mean, it's kind of unique and interesting at the same time, because as we sit here, I think kind of to further drive this point home, I was in the bookstore the other day, and being a guy your age, just is kind of make you kind of stand back and say, oh yeah, wow, I just kind of realized it. I seen a Time Life book on the Beach Boys, and it's kind of in celebration of the fact that the Beach Boys, if you can believe it, Vince, have not been around 30, 40, or 50 years, but 60 years.
60 years.
Yeah.
It came out in 61, I believe it was,
Yeah.
with that surf sound. And exactly.
And so, like a lot of this stuff, even the Beach Boys and the Beatles, I'm aware of this stuff not because I have like a ton of Beatles albums, but because even growing up, I'd hear that stuff being played on the radio or TV, or even when you'd hear it be played in movies. And the older this music gets, a lot of times you'll hear it played on like featured in on a movie soundtrack, because it's considered like a timepiece from back in the 60s or 70s. And so a lot of people kind of grow up with the music kind of in a different way than maybe you grew up with it.
No, understand.
Yeah.
And of course, the way they use these songs in soundtrack is to denote the time and place. So it's interesting. Some of those choices in films are interesting. I want to just close with this bit about the Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Sure.
To you and to all of our listeners. Do yourselves a favor. Listen to the first album.
Yeah, definitely.
And the second album. That's all you need to know when you find out, when you go into the third, fourth, and so on, the differences of what they went through. The first record and the second are night and day, completely different, yet similar, of course.
Yeah.
Because most of the guys were the same, but just the vocals, the song choices that were put on the albums, and the production values, they're completely different. And you'll get a good feeling about where they decided to go in the future. There's one guy left.
Interesting.
One guy left, and that's the drummer.
And Vince, I'll tell you what I'm going to do after we finish this today. I am going to go and kind of familiarize myself with the third album, because in prepping for this today, I kind of wanted to have something to bookend on. So I thought, okay, being that this is 2021 and this is a 50th anniversary of the fourth album, not that it's like a landmark album or anything, just it's kind of interesting because you see the band when they play Woodstock at the peak of their career. That's the most popular maybe music from their era, or from that time in the band's career. And then you end it with conversation kind of with the 50th anniversary of that fourth album, and but to me it's kind of like a lackluster of an album, because like I listened to the whole fourth album, and I kind of was like you, left feeling okay. I haven't appreciated
to me. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really give me a good kick. I felt, to me, it was more of an album like of show tunes. That's just kind of my perspective, being what it is. But I listened to stuff they played at Woodstock. We'll end it on here. Kind of what they played at Woodstock, like you mentioned, More to More. To me, I listened to this, and I thought, okay, this is a very kind of upbeat. It's a great song to open the Woodstock set with. And again, I'm kind of picturing myself, if I had been at Woodstock, that these are songs I could really kind of get down to. And then we had Just One Smile. Again, it's really upbeat. It kind of sounds like a song right out of the 60s. Not that there's anything bad, but this is, you listen to this, and this was when this band was on fire. Something coming on. A bit of an upbeat rock fusion here. You can feel the upbeat spirit of a song, and I like it. And again, when I listen to the album number 4, the thing I'm left thinking is kind of, where's the energy here? And that's just, I guess, at that point, the band's progression.
Right.
And then I liked also, you mentioned the song More Than You'll Ever Know. This song is a fusion of rock, jazz, and R&B. See, I think by the time you get to album number 4, what I was hearing more and more on that album was kind of I think at that point, they want to do something maybe a little different. They're thinking, because again, when I'm listening to the fourth album today for the first time, prepping for this, I'm kind of trying to think, what does this sound like? Right away to my ears, it sounds like a combination of, I hear influences like everything from fusion, a little bit of jazz, rock, gospel, and even R&B.
Well, you're right, because jazz rock was what they were known, what we knew them as. As jazz rock. Fusion is like putting jazz and rock and this and that together, all fused together. Which is what fusion is. And if you have jazz rock, that's a fusion, but on the more baser level than putting in other three ingredients. You know? And then the fifth track they played at Woodstock was the one I knew, Spinning Wheel. Your favorite.
Well, it's my favorite in the sense that that's the one song that I've heard before. So, and I've heard it a million times. So, I kind of think, okay, that's when I think of this band, for whatever reason, that's the song I think of. And again, I
love that. I'll tell you why. Because whenever you hear or anybody hears that song, that brings them back to that point where they remember it, they love it. That brings back that wonderful memory of that wonderful time in your life when you first couple of times you hear this song and it made an impression. That's what I love about hearing from you.
And I think that's the interesting thing when you're talking about two people from two different generations. And so of all the songs, like I said, we'll be discussing today, this is the one song I was aware of. I heard it many, many times before, but had no idea it was by Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And so again, when I'm listening to this today, I say, I've heard that song. I can't tell you how many times on the radio.
Right.
And then Something in Winter. This is definitely music from a specific generation. Great mood music, very much an upbeat song again. And see, I think that's the difference between album 4 and what they played at Woodstock. What they played at Woodstock was much more upbeat. You could really kind of picture the crowd getting up on their feet and kind of, smiling phase. This is probably my second favorite song from Blood, Sweat, and Tears that they played, during their Woodstock set. Spinning Wheel would be, like I said, my top song from this set list. I like it. I'm talking about smiling phase. I like the subject matter. The fact that you can write a song just about kind of being happy and smiling. And you mentioned God Bless the Child. This is a little more of a moody kind of gospel song to me. Gets a bit of a major kick in the midsection, which is, I kind of really is what I dug about the song. It starts off, you think it's going to be kind of a slower song, and then halfway through it kind of really gets a major kick in the you-know-where.
Right, it goes into a swing, and that's indicative of at least a handful of songs on each one of their early albums. They start someplace, they go someplace else, and they bring it back to the original. They've done that a lot. That's kind of a
trademark of theirs.
A defining factor of what they were about back then.
And then you mentioned the song "And When I Die." Now, again, like you, Vince, this I don't have to say too much about this song except for the fact that I just loved it. There wasn't really much thinking. I just listened to it, and I can get down on this.
Those tempos and feel changes, the feel of the songs. This is another one that's indicative of that. That very last one, "You Made Me So Very Happy," that's pretty much, that's where it was. I love when it goes to that refrain with the horns, da 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 da. I mean, that just kicked your ass.
Oh, really? And I got to tell you, again, the one you just mentioned, "You Made Me So Very Happy," that was probably maybe my second or third song that I really liked from the set list. And what I liked about it, first of all, perfect song to kind of end the show with. And I kind of got the
biggest hit at the time, and that was why they reserved it for last.
And I kind of got the feeling again, like just picturing if I was at that show, you could kind of see the guy singing the song and kind of saying, like to his audience, his fans, like, "Thank you for coming to the show today. Thank you for checking out what we're all about." Kind of a song of thank you, if you will, to your audience.
They were great. They were great. There's no denying it. And one of the real breakthrough bands with the jazz rock fusion stuff that opened up the music to more, gave us more. But we didn't know that much about jazz.
Now, Vince, let me ask you, as a guy that's a Blood, Sweat, and Tears fan, you mentioned like there's only one original guy left. Have you checked out anything the band's done in recent years, or have you continue to follow them? And what do you think of what they're doing now compared to way back?
Honestly, no, because I'm still stuck on the first few records.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because that's where my memories are, and that's where I know the best of the best lives. Now, there's not to say anything else in the future wasn't
good
reaching that, but as far as full albums go, no.
And sadly, as a guy like you, Vince, who was a fan from back when, when they were playing Woodstock and stuff in that era, and you said even before Blood, Sweat, and Tears, I think like a lot of people like you, Vince, that are those diehard fans from back in the day, if you were to go check out Blood and Sweat and Tears today, even though they have one original member, those are the songs you're going to want to hear from that first album.
Right.
And that's indicative of any band. Just like even though Van Halen, let's say, had nothing but number one albums with Sammy Hagar, a lot of Van Halen fans, when they were still able to go see a Van Halen show, they wanted to hear a lot of the stuff they did with David Lee Roth, just because that was when they got into the band. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and that's very true. It's truer today with everybody than it was back then. You want to hear the hits. You want to hear the ones that made you feel great, that turned you on to be the fan or whatever it would be.
Yeah,
that's important.
Yeah, and before we wrap this up, Vince, I want to thank you today, because I think doing this episode, I had a lot of fun today, because for the simple fact that this was a band that I knew the least about. So in prepping for it, I don't like to do an episode and not have any idea what I'm talking about, So so I honestly listened to the fourth album and all the songs they played during the Woodstock set, as I've been saying throughout the episode. And what's interesting, I listened to the fourth album first because I'm thinking, okay, this is the album we're going to talk about. It's 50 years old, and it's kind of interesting I chose to do it in that order, because I'm listening to it and kind of think, oh wow, what is this? It doesn't really kind of get me up on my feet. Even a Michael Jackson kind of album gets me more up on my feet. But the point being, when I went back and listened to this earlier stuff, like we're talking about, that is when the band was on fire. It's like two different perspectives. I thought, wow, I'm not really into that album number 4, but you know what? This stuff is getting me up on my feet. This is when the band was on fire.
That's a great perspective, because it's almost like by going backwards, you could see, it's like time traveling backwards, and you can see where the fourth album came from because of the third, or where the third came from because of the second.
And I don't know why I chose to do it. I don't know why I chose to do it that way, but it gave it a much more interesting perspective, I think.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
And so, Vince, anything else before we wrap this up you want to... I was just kind of curious. Last time we talked, you weren't able to talk about, but you'd said that you were maybe working on another project that you were going to announce soon. Can you talk about that yet?
I've got 4 or 5 things that I'm going to be working on as more of a sub versus joining anything.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. You can at least still get out there.
Right. They've got 4 or 5 different bands. There is a group in San Diego that I'm working on semi-regularly, and they do Petty and Stones and a bunch of other stuff in a variety. But one would be a Pretenders, one would be a Rod Stewart, one would be a Creedence, and I forget what the fourth one is on the tip of my tongue.
Well, but I'm interested in following these gigs as you start to get them, because again, primarily when you and I initially hooked up, you were playing in a Rolling Stones tribute at the time. You're no longer with them. But even just these projects that you're kind of going to be partially involved with, just listen to the multi-generational, everything from Tom Petty to Rod Stewart, the Pretenders. I mean, it's kind of interesting if you go and you play these shows, different types of fans, but I could see, going to see a cover band do all those different kind of types of music, and I'm into all that stuff,
Well, thank you for the opportunity to have me on as a guest to do from one show 14 shows with plans to do others.
Well, yeah, I want.
It's mind blowing that you would continually come back to the well and that there's water there.
Well, Vince, you are a big reason because of that, and I'll tell you. I want people to know, listening to this, initially this started off with me interviewing you about the Jimi Hendrix album, Axis Bold Love.
Right.
And you were telling me at that time, well, that's my favorite Jimi album. So we discussed it, and people can check that out. I'll post it later, again, if people want to check it out again. But after that interview, you reached out to me again. You said, you told me about how you had attended Woodstock, one day. And I thought, wow, even just to attend Woodstock for one day, that's quite the event. And after we did the what was initially supposed to be just a one-part interview, by the time we got to that interview, I realized, first of all, there's so much more to talk about than, it'd take just much more than one interview for the simple fact that look at all the bands that played. So I thought, initially we talked about in episode 2, I think, of a documentary. And as we went on, I started to think there's so much to talk about. This is a historical thing. And it's been fun along the way because I have learned, because of a generational gap, I have learned so much that I did not even know. And that kind of includes prepping for today when you and I were chatting. We're kind of discussing what we're going to do on the next show, which is discuss Sean and Nunn. And you said, well, I'm not a huge fan of that, but we were kind of chatting. Let's do a show on that, not just because they played the event, but I kind of looked at a video clip of Sean and Nunn today, and I thought, how did they get on Woodstock? They much more of a kind of, to me, a comedy skit or something. And we're going to talk.
There's a story behind them getting on there. I'm sure we're going to, as we did, we'll figure it all out.
Yeah, but I just want people to know that's how this has been able to extend into 14 episodes, because there's just so much to talk about. And I don't know when it's going to come to an end, but whenever it does, I was even thinking we could kind of take it a little farther, talking about the Woodstock from '94, but we're going to concentrate on what we're doing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. There's just so much out there, so much to talk about. Opinions, I don't know if I have a million opinions or not, but by the virtue of the fact that I'm alive.
Yeah, and you were there. That's see, you have a very different perspective on all this tonight because you were there, even if it was just for one day. Like I said, I didn't come into the world until 2 years after Woodstock, and I'm just gonna really wrap it up with this now, Vince. See, that's the whole point. We've turned this into 14 episodes, and I want people to realize. Right now, we have recorded so many of these episodes that we have enough of these shows to roll out for the rest of the year into next year. So we're going to be doing this again in 2 weeks. So Vince, thanks for doing this. You have a great day, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you, my friend. We'll talk again. Bye. People.